Are you thinking of leaving corporate, but too afraid to make the move? Have you already escaped corporate, but are finding it hard to run your dream business? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure challenges out on your own? We have created a podcast for corporate escapees running their own business. This is the Corporate Escapees Podcast by Build, Live, Give. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day as a corporate escapee. We get real with no corporate BS. And now, over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome, Steph Barr from Barr None to the Corporate Escapees podcast by Build, Live, Give. So, Steph, I can't wait to hear more about you today, but why don't we just kick off with something family or friends would know about you that our listeners wouldn't?
Sure. So probably one thing that family and friends would know about me, but you wouldn't be able to find out on the internet perhaps, is that I really love musicals. And in that vein of kind of, I guess, singing and dancing, I've always wanted to be on Play School, but I guess that career hasn't worked out for me yet.
Yet? So there's still hope?
I don't know. I've never actually gone after the dream. It's kind of, I think I just remembered the other day that I'd always wanted to be on Play School when someone talked about Play School, and I thought, oh, that's a job that I always thought I wanted, but I never actually tried to get it. I'm sure it pays terribly. But yeah, there's more stuff than that, I guess.
And what's a musical, I know it's hard to pick your favourite musical, but if you had to go to one tomorrow, what would you go to?
Yeah, I guess a classic is Sweeney Todd. I like Stephen Sondheim's music across all his musicals, and I really like the witty, I guess, lyrics. But I do also like sort of, I guess, more modern musicals and a bit quirky musicals. So sort of off-Broadway ones and things like that.
Excellent. Brilliant.
Yeah. I'm a bit sick of Wicked. It's been, I wish there'd be more quirky musicals coming to Australia, but the audience just isn't big enough, I don't think. So we keep getting Les Mis and Wicked, and I love Book of Mormon. That was a nice breath of fresh air, I think.
Yes.
So hopefully more like that.
Great. And do you think that this whole virtual musicals will get off? I know that I think whether it's Katy Perry or someone's having the first sort of virtual concert soon. Do you think something like that will allow you to be anywhere in the world? And
I think maybe if you're able to incorporate a virtual reality element, that could be quite cool. I know they're looking at doing that with live music festivals. But I think the thing that I love about musicals, I certainly like listening to the music when I'm at home alone and having a bit of a sing-along. And I do like watching videos of musicals, but I think there's nothing like being there in person, and you kind of get the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, and just, the sound and the energy in the theatre is just, you can't reproduce that, I don't think. But maybe from a virtual reality perspective you could.
Or maybe it'll go the other way, that the flights will get that cheap and they'll be that quick that you can just fly around the world anywhere and see your musicals.
Oh, hopefully, yeah. The very, very quick flights, like a train ride or something.
Yeah, spot on. So I know you worked at one of the biggest companies in Australia first, which was Telstra. But why don't you sort of talk about your corporate escapee story, how you went from corporate to doing what you do now. We'll ask more about what you're doing now in later sections, but more about that transition. We'll ask a few questions around that.
Yeah, so I guess I was at Telstra for quite a number of years, fortunately, when they were having a very strong period of growth. And I guess after a while I was looking for a new challenge, and so I took a couple of other roles that I thought would be interesting to me, and eventually ended up in strategy at a creative agency, a very, very well-known and well-awarded creative agency. And I guess I just always had this kind of niggling, I'd always at the back of my mind thought that I wanted to go out on my own and start my own business. And I think I just, after having a couple of additional roles after Telstra, I decided that I had a lot to offer. I'd, learned enough to kind of set up my own thing and go out on my own. And the opportunity actually came up to go curling for Australia. So as a side hobby, I curl on the Australian women's curling team. And I didn't have enough leave to go and curl for 5 weeks. So I said to my boss at the time, look, I really want to go curling. I'm thinking about maybe just resigning, and then if I come back, then you want to hire me back, you can. If not, that's okay. So when I got back, they actually want to hire me back, but I decided that I was going to go out on my own. And yeah, so that was kind of in the back of my mind. I did actually sort of, leave partly to start my own thing, but the kind of opportunity to curl and the reminder that being in a corporate environment doesn't always allow you that flexibility to have or to take other opportunities as easily as you may be able to if you are in charge of yourself. Really kind of just was an opportune moment to kind of make that transition for me.
Great. And bit of ignorance here, but is curling where you basically reduce the ice and the unit goes through? Is that curling, or have I got it wrong?
It is on ice. It's basically like lawn bowls on ice, but you can sweep the ice with a sort of broom to make the rock go faster and straighter. So you throw a big stone called a rock, and it's made of granite from Scotland. All the curling rocks come from the same quarry in Scotland. And yeah, basically one player on the team. There's usually 4 players on a team. One person throws the rock, the other couple of people sweep it, and then there's a team captain or skip at the other end that sort of yells at everyone to work as a team and do whatever everyone's meant to be doing.
Excellent. Well, I can categorically say you're the first curling expert that we've had, and certainly someone who's represented their country as well. So
there's not many curlers in Australia.
No, well, let's not go there. Let's keep it at that you're representing your country, which is brilliant. And if you look at that, when you did decide to leave, and I understand the reasons, what were some of the biggest fears that you had at the time, if you had any at all?
So I guess one of the biggest fears, or the biggest fear really, is just, I guess, failing, which is probably everyone's fear. And actually, I guess a fear for me, failure would be that I would return to corporate work for someone else, I guess. And maybe just that people wouldn't take me seriously out on my own. They're probably the biggest fears.
Yeah, and was there any time that you did get to that point where you think, you know what, things just aren't going well, I think I might have to go back to corporate?
I think a lot of people out on their own have that thought quite often in the initial sort of years. So from time to time when things get tough, or, you've worked really long days, or you're just finding a client really hard to deal with, or, you're having issues that you just didn't have to deal with when you were in a sort of corporate bubble, if you like. I think, you do have times where you think, oh, maybe I should go and get a job again. Maybe it would be easier. And so I think it, you definitely have those times of crisis. I know other business owners in all kinds of industries who will go through sort of crisis points. And I think the default thing to think at that time is maybe I should just go back and get a salaried job again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. And what's some advice you've got? Because I'm sure there's lots of people out there in our audience at that position, maybe even today. And I know it does differ by day sometimes. What sort of advice did you give yourself that you could give to our audience? Yeah,
so I guess I have given myself I give myself, I guess, sort of medium-term goals rather than just short-term or long-term, and sort of try to stick to those. And I guess at those times where you do have a moment of crisis or a moment of sort of lacking self-confidence, I think it's always good to talk to someone that's close to you, whether that be a partner or not necessarily a friend, unless they are also an entrepreneur or have a business themselves. But I think talking to a mentor or someone else who is in a similar position who can understand what you're going through is really helpful. And I think it is hard when you're in a business, in the day-to-day operation of it, to try and keep sight of how well you're doing. So sometimes it might feel like it's a real uphill battle, but you've actually achieved quite a lot. And I think that's where the sort of the day-to-day of it can get you down a little bit sometimes, but you do need to just remember what you're trying to achieve and why you did take that path in life, I guess, and certainly reassess at certain points whether it's right for you still. But I think everyone within themselves will know whether having their own business is right for them or whether they actually really do prefer, being employed by someone else.
Well, the next section we're going to go through is the build section. And if someone was to ask you, Steph, what do you do? How do you answer that?
I don't think I answer it particularly well. I just say I work for myself usually. But I guess an extension to that is I usually say I have a strategic insights agency, and we focus primarily on brand strategy and marketing effectiveness.
Great. And then do they normally say, so what does that mean?
Yes.
And then what do you say?
Well, I suppose I usually give them an example. It depends how knowledgeable they are about brand and marketing in general, I guess. So if they've worked, in a larger organization that maybe has a market research department or a brand strategy area, or they've worked with a creative agency or something like that, then I would probably give them a longer explanation. But I guess from a fundamental perspective, I would use an example of either an advertisement or, say, a logo, and talk to them about, okay, brands as a logo primarily maybe. Well, how do people come to designing that logo? So then I talk them through how we use consumer insights and market research and cultural trends to really come up with a brief that allows creatives to be creative in a fashion that is going to solve problems for businesses and communicate to their target market in a particular way. So I guess we help guide creativity by creating parameters that allow people to work autonomously but towards a shared purpose. So an example of how I think about that is, if I ask you to draw a picture, you will start having to make decisions of your own in your head. If I tell you nothing else, then can you draw a picture for me? You'll start to think, okay, well, do I use a pen or a pencil? So you have to make that choice yourself. What do I draw? Well, maybe you start thinking about, what did I like to draw when I was a child? All right, I like drawing cars. I'm going to draw a car. So as you go along the process of creation, there are decision points that you make, and the more you can guide people in their thinking without constraining them to come up with a very specific pre-prescribed piece of work, the more effective that piece of communication or visual asset will be.
Great. And I used to do a lot of this when I was in my Coke days, and I think Coke was probably one of the highest spends of insights in the world, consumer insights. I've been out of the game a little bit, but what has changed? Like, is there any technology that's coming in to make it easier, or is it still, a lot based on human behaviours?
Yeah. I guess that's the input into the sort of strategic guidelines, is that we do talk to a lot of consumers about what they think of brands or what their needs are in terms of certain products, because often when you're working in a business, you lose sight of what other people would like from your offering. So there is new technology happening all the time. There's a lot of AI technology coming to the space. We've got an AI sentiment analysis tool actually within our tools that we use to measure and quantify brand sentiment. There's also, I guess, there's been online surveys for a long time, obviously, but there are more online qualitative panels that allow you to have faster access, I guess, to qualitative feedback. But for me, I still love getting people in a room and running a focus group, because I think there's nothing better than seeing people's reactions as well as hearing them, and that's always going to be invaluable to businesses, seeing the reactions of real people.
Yeah, and I certainly think as a general rule, and this is a general rule that I've observed, so I'd love to get your thoughts on it, that a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs don't spend enough time developing their brand. You know, they're very much around delivering customer focus, which I think is brilliant, but often the brand piece is left aside. Is that what you see in a lot of small and medium businesses?
Yeah, definitely. So we have worked with startups as well as very large businesses and everything in between. I'd say definitely small businesses and startups should certainly be customer focused. Wherever you can, talk to real people, get feedback on your product as early as possible. Even if you're working in an agile methodology, I know I just mentioned focus groups, but getting people in to experience your product and how you're planning to have people in the market experience that and getting feedback on it as soon as possible is really going to help your growth trajectory and the success of your product in market. From a brand perspective, I would say yes, from my experience, most businesses when they're starting up, just for lack of probably financial resources or prioritization of investment in different areas, pretty much usually just start with a logo and maybe a style guide, and that's kind of the main work that they do in terms of their brand, and of course a website. But certainly doing a little bit of strategic work before that, before even briefing your designer on a logo, because they will make those decisions themselves around what the logo looks like if you don't give them sort of guidelines in that area. That can certainly be valuable and really help you refine your own thinking about what you want from the business, as well as help make that qualitative decision making as you go along much easier, I guess, because you have a reference point about what you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to go about it. And then certainly injecting sort of some customer feedback and checking in with your customers whether what you envisaged from a qualitative perspective for your business is really what they're going to be looking for as well.
And you talked about startups through to large, but if you had to articulate your ideal client, who's your ideal client?
Yeah, so where I think we're able to help businesses the most is actually when they're in that medium size of business. And that's mostly because, as you've just said, generally when businesses start or launch, they maybe haven't invested that much in understanding their brand or even a marketing strategy, if you like. So it's probably been a bit scattergun and a bit ad hoc, if you like. And when businesses have grown quite swiftly to sort of 20 or 50 people, and particularly technology businesses, we find have that kind of rapid growth, they often get to a size where their employees are starting to make decisions on their own, but they don't necessarily have that kind of guiding vision or purpose or brand values to really help guide the way those employees are behaving. And they're starting to show up as a bit fragmented in market with various marketing initiatives happening sort of on their own, if you like. So it's almost like a kind of octopus going off and its tentacles all going in different directions. So I guess that's where we really find businesses value our services the most, and we see the biggest kind of change in the organisation and the way it operates, as well as really getting some really good results in terms of the marketing effectiveness as well. Certainly big organisations have, very good resources to look at optimising things like brand and marketing, and sometimes, there are businesses that are very large that do need to undergo large transformational change, but certainly those businesses that have had a rapid phase of growth and have maybe just been kind of DIYing things for a while are where we see the most kind of positive impact.
Yeah, and as far as any tips on how you decided that was your ideal client, those medium-sized businesses?
Yeah, so just based on the range of clients that we've worked with, we have had quite a few technology and software businesses that have become very good clients of ours, and it's nice from an insights perspective in that they're always looking to innovate as well, rather than have to gain insights to fix a problem. So from an insights perspective, they're generally quite forward-looking. And from a brand and marketing perspective, they have often built businesses that are not so customer-centric necessarily, and have not necessarily thought about their business from a brand perspective. And they do tend to, I guess, grow quite rapidly. Technology has a fast uptake. So I guess that is the kind of business that fits into that sort of, they've grown quickly and need to then have that sort of brand qualitative overlay to bring everything together nicely. And really just from working with clients in that industry and of that size that we've found we really enjoy working with, and they really enjoy the results that we deliver. So it's rewarding for all parties.
Great. And as far as how you make revenue, what's sort of your business model look like? How do you commercialise your great IP?
So initially, we generally come in on, a project engagement, but obviously project-based revenue is not an excellent strategy in the long run. So from there, we generally try to, as an extension of that initial strategy or project kind of work that we put in place, we have some measurement tools, measurement, tracking, monitoring tools, whatever you'd like to call them, and also an advisory program that we tend to recommend to the businesses to make sure that all of the strategy that we've put in place for them is really tracking well and they're getting the most out of it. And that also means that they can ask any questions and feel really supported along the way as well, because even the best laid plans sometimes go a bit awry in execution. So certainly we want to make sure that they're able to work through any challenges that they're facing in the execution phase.
And those measurement tools, can you just give an example?
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the business and which kind of, I guess, marketing is critical to them. But basically looking at marketing effectiveness. So it may include a quantitative survey of their customers and employees. It may include things like social media monitoring. It may include a sentiment analysis tool. I think I mentioned before we have an AI tool that is a sentiment analysis tool that basically quantifies brand sentiment and has been linked to decision making. So there's certain elements or emotional elements that you want to associate with a brand to help people choose your brand. We're not sort of technology. I guess we're sort of tech agnostic. So we like to recommend solutions that are best for our clients rather than, having specific businesses that we always recommend, because I don't think there's any one sort of piece of technology that's right for every business necessarily. But we do certainly always like to include short form surveys to check in with customers and employees about how the new brand and marketing is resonating with them. So essentially we think of monitoring three key areas when it comes to brand and marketing, and that's employee engagement, customer experience, and then the general market around their advertising and marketing perception from the brand.
Okay, great. And what's your unique value proposition? Why would people work with you versus other agencies?
So I guess what we offer is a combination of market research, strategy, and I'll say creative, but we're not so executional, more like creative ideas. So in a similar way to kind of like what the big four consultancy firms are trying to do in bringing, or rather purchasing, creative agencies and research agencies, we offer a much more boutique service that has the same skill sets within it and allows businesses to operate in a much more agile fashion. We're seeing strategy. Some people say strategy is dead, but we see a lot more value when people have a high-level guiding strategy that enables their marketing teams to act in a much more agile fashion. So if the plan is kind of in place, then your team is able to make a lot more effective decisions on their own, on the fly. So digital becomes a much easier kind of landscape to navigate for your team. Essentially it brings those sort of key three skill sets or three key areas of brand and marketing together under the one roof, where mostly they're kind of siloed offerings or come with a very, very, very expensive price tag.
And just quickly on the strategy is dead. Why do you think people say that?
Well, I guess it's more from a time-based perspective. So because, and it's more from a creative strategy perspective. So often with campaign-based marketing now, the time to have strategy and planning often gets cut quite short. So that for us is really where that core brand strategy becomes really, really imperative, in that very high level plan can then help you make much more, as I said, agile decisions when you're looking at sort of A/B testing or comments on social media and things like that.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the more solid the core, the quicker you can be nimble. And I think that's what I think people often miss is they think, well, it's got to be all agile. And it's like, no, well, actually that's not the case. If it's all agile, then it gets messy and it doesn't work. And as far as, improving the profitability of your business, what are a couple of key things you've done to improve the profitability of your business?
Yeah, so I guess we've experimented with a few. This is quite boring. Cash flow and billing time frames and things like that, and billing models. So I think something that no one, or just never occurred to me when I went out on my own, was that people don't necessarily pay their bills on time.
Surely not.
Well, I've studied finance and accounting, and I know cash flow is king, but
Correct.
never ever in the subject do they say, this is how you deal with people who don't pay their invoices on time.
Yes.
So I guess we've just tried to bring as much as possible the revenue stream forward. So at the moment, we generally do sort of if it's a project base, it's generally, depending on the size, we generally do projects under 10 grand build up front. Projects that are sort of medium sized and don't drag out for too long are generally sort of 60% up front, 40% on completion. And for much bigger projects, we sometimes sort of almost turn that into a retainer or a monthly kind of breakdown of invoicing. So I guess, when we first started out, we were a bit more lenient with our payment terms and things like that. And certainly we still try to not let billing get in the way of excellent consulting and relationships. But just being mindful about cash flow and bringing it as much upfront as possible really helps move things along in a smooth way.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And the one little addition that I'd say there is if people are doing a 60-40 or a 50-50 split, just don't do it on a completion date. Do it on a time-based. Because so often service-based businesses, the client gets busy, something's happened, you're going to pay your suppliers.
Yes.
So you're always wearing that cash risk.
Yes.
And if it's the client that's actually, for whatever reason, can't deliver on their commitments, that's fine, but they wear that risk, not you.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned we do actually have a sort of similar term to that, which is the on completion date that we've set. So unless we were unable to deliver to that for some reason, if it's the client pushing that out, then yes, we certainly we stick to that.
Yeah, brilliant. And what's the number one source of new business for you?
This is going to sound terrible coming from a marketer, but it's generally referrals. Sorry,
that's about a 90% answer that I normally get from agencies. So
yeah,
that's fine.
I mean, I guess from a marketing and brand perspective in the industry, it's not very widely accepted that you would advertise unless you're targeting small businesses. And I guess when you're acting in an advisory capacity, particularly, generally business decision makers like someone they know to refer a trusted advisor. So that kind of referral really is very valuable. The other source that we generally find, and it is similar to a referral, is PR. So I guess it's just someone else who is credible. So a media source endorsing your opinion and your expertise.
Great. And just a quick tip on referrals, like what's one thing you've done that's really moved the needle on referrals?
I guess just asking for the referral. So touching in with clients that have enjoyed the experience, or first actually asking them how they found the experience. So obviously you don't want clients that have been left with a bitter taste in their mouth. And if they have, you'd certainly want to know, I assume, to improve your experience. But definitely if they've, had a positive experience, touching base with them from time to time just to check in if there's anyone they can think of in their network who might benefit from that same kind of service. And generally people tend to, I find, recommend you if the circumstances arise in conversation. I'd say maintaining an active kind of knowledge content presence on LinkedIn, and I forgot to mention speaking at conferences, but certainly keeping that sort of visibility and top of mind awareness through knowledge content channels is also useful to help keep you top of mind when people are having conversations with their colleagues about whichever area you're working in.
Yeah, I think that's great. And with referrals, I also suggest that people do it at the start of the sale as well, not always wait to the end. And it's not just about the fact that, most people will say, well, I can't yet because I've got to wait till I do a great job. Look, you do a great job. So that's, but time-wise, why wait 3 months when you can get a great referral straight away? So I often say to people, as soon as you close the sale, that's a great time to ask for a referral. Yeah. As far as your team, so how big is your team?
So it sort of fluctuates between 3 and 5 people, I guess. So I've got another couple of part-time people that work with me, and then I have some contractors that work in specialised areas, so digital strategy and market research that sort of drop in and out of the team. And I've also got a couple of partners that work in market research around various areas of Australia. So if we're doing a focus group or some depth interviews or something that require a face-to-face approach, then we have sort of, I guess, contract-based team members that we draw on from time to time.
Sure. And what have you learned in building a team, which is both, direct and contractors? What are a couple of key lessons you can share with our listeners?
Whenever I have employees or team members working with me, I always like to make sure that they're learning something. So I think when you're starting out, not that we don't pay our people well, I do try to pay everyone very, very well as much as possible. But certainly I know I have always taken roles where I've looked to learn something. Mm-hmm. And I know that for millennials particularly, they look for jobs where they're learning something and they're building their own skill base. So as much as possible, I try to educate my team around what we're doing, why we're doing it. I find that also helps them work much more autonomously. It gives them a sense of purpose and helps them feel like what they're doing is meaningful. Obviously, there's always mundane tasks in a business that someone needs to do. And I think if they can really understand how that helps with the final result and deliverable to the client, and they can see the value that maybe monotonous work or the, not very exciting work that they're doing actually helps everyone else and helps that final result, that's very beneficial.
Great. And what's your biggest challenge that you face in the business at the moment?
I guess scaling in a sustainable and a high quality fashion. So I guess working in the area of strategy, while I'd like to think you can hire anyone, you kind of can't. In some respects, I think you either have the mindset to work in strategy or you don't. And similarly with market research and insights, I think you either have that kind of inquisitive nature about people and their behaviour and what's important to them or you don't. So just finding the right people to hire within the business can be quite a challenge. And I guess, that's largely the key to growing a service business. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're about to go into the live section, but just before we do that, I just want to talk about our community at BLG, which helps corporate escapees like Steph to Build, Live and Give. So you get direct coaching by myself and access to hundreds of vetted suppliers like Steph to help you build your dream business. So you can find out more by going to blgboost.com, and we'll be there to help you. So, Steph, the next section is the live section. So just tell us a couple of daily habits you've got that help you to be successful.
Sure. So my daily habits that I like to try to stick to, but to be honest, some days they do go by the wayside. I know I'm a better person when I exercise every morning. So it tends to wake me up better than coffee, even though I also have a coffee. I try to get up quite early. So usually I get up at about 5:30 or 6. My partner tends to get up then anyway. So I get up then, I walk my dog, and I'll also try to fit in an exercise class. So that might be yoga or Pilates or something that just gets me moving. And then I also try to fit in a 10-minute meditation. So my mind tends to be quite busy if I don't meditate, and I find that just really sets me up and helps me feel a sense of clarity and just slows my mind down. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm anxious usually, but whatever the opposite of anxious is, I guess calm. I just find it calming and really opens up my mind. And then I have a coffee and breakfast, and then I'm ready to go.
Great. And do you use any apps for the meditation?
I do. I use the Headspace app.
Great. Yeah. That's highly recommended by our community. So that's great. And sorry, you were just about to say something else?
Oh, I was going to say at the end of the day, sometimes I do work from home, even though we, of course, have an office space. If I'm working from home, I like to shut the door on my home office just to make sure that I've, I guess, put work aside in my brain so that it's not coming into my home life.
Brilliant. And you mentioned your partner, which is Justin.
Yes.
So if Justin's listening to this, what would you like to say to him about the support he's given you as you've been growing your own business?
I guess I'd just like to thank him so much for being very supportive, because I know it's not easy living with someone sometimes maybe that is venturing off into the unknown and faces the ups and downs of running a business. So he's been very, very supportive and has always been very proud, as he would say, to turn up to any kind of speaking event that I'm at. And even though he doesn't necessarily probably know a lot of background to sort of marketing and media, he's always very engaged with listening to what I have to say and always says I have done a very excellent job. So that's always nice to hear.
Brilliant. Well, the next section's the give section. And what's a cause or a community that's close to your heart, and why?
Yeah, so I always prioritize giving to the Lost Dogs Home and I guess charities that look after stray animals, if you like, because there are always a lot of cats and dogs, but I guess I'm more inclined to be a dog person, that are lost at any one time. So I think if you look on petrescue.com.au, there's about 500 dogs at any one time that don't have a home in Victoria. And the Lost Dogs Home is kind of my local charity that I like to give to, and that includes everything from, I guess, used towels to monetary donations. And I'd certainly encourage people to think about adopting a dog if they're looking to get a new dog rather than buying a puppy.
Fantastic. And the last section is the action section, and this is where we just get some rapid responses from you to these questions. So the first one is, what's your top 3 productivity tips?
Don't multitask. Read widely, in terms of just be interested in reading lots of random stuff.
Yes.
And I think exercise, so including that kind of daily habit of exercising, really helps my productivity and boost my energy levels.
Okay, great. And what are some favourite apps or software that you recommend?
So I'm a bit old school, so you're probably not going to like my response to this.
That's all right.
I do use Xero, so that's probably a really good accounting tool. It's not uncommon knowledge that it's very popular. I had worked with MYOB previously, but I do like Xero. I found that a lot of my clients use so many different apps. So at one point, I had Slack, Evernote, Basecamp, or I had everything on the go, and it was just too much. So I actually really love email. I find as a centralized tool, it's a really good still sort of work project management tool. And personally, I do use, and with my team, an agile wall, as well as a bullet journal, which are more traditional, I guess, or not. Agile wall's not necessarily more traditional, but I do like to bring planning into the physical space. I find that helps just really, really make it present, rather than being able to sort of close it out in an app or something. As I said before, I don't find multitasking too productive. So if you've got something like Slack popping up all the time with notifications, I actually find that quite distracting. So that's probably, a bit to the side of the kind of recommendations you maybe wanted. But I try not to overcrowd my life with too many apps.
No, that's good. And look, it's good to have variety. I must admit, we do highly recommend technology, but the technology is there to give you the freedom, and you're not constrained by it. And I think notifications is a great point. I certainly recommend everyone turn off their notifications, especially on their phone. I turn off everything and then have set times when I'll go and do something rather than being constantly interrupted. And it's a bit. They used to talk about smoking, how addictive it is, and certainly I think mobile phones and social media, or just the noise that comes from your devices can replace that these days. And what about podcasts and books? What's a podcast or book you recommend, and why?
So I listen to a podcast called From the Trenches, which is two accountants who are quite entertaining. I don't read that much. I guess I tend to read sort of industry news, and I do sometimes read media theory books. I actually am much bigger. This is going to sound terrible as well. I really like consuming my media from an audiovisual perspective. So I tend to watch a lot of documentaries and TV shows and movies, and I've got Netflix and Stan and all that kind of thing. So that's not so professional it's not professional, but it's not so helpful necessarily directly from a professional perspective. But I find that from a cultural perspective, it does really help you stay in touch with where the culture is heading, definitely staying across YouTube. And I think that's what I kind of touched on when I said be curious, and definitely sort of look to read widely or just consume media widely. I do also read, probably my favourite blog is called Wait But Why, and I believe it's one of Elon Musk's favourite blogs as well. He has been interviewed on there for a very lengthy blog topic, but the reason I like it is because it takes everyday kind of cultural situations and analyzes them from a very practical perspective using both words and visual diagrams and things.
Great. Well, we'll definitely have that and all the links in the show notes. And finally, what's some parting advice, Steph, that you've got for the Build, Live, Give audience?
I guess just check in with yourself from time to time and make sure what you're doing on a daily basis is fulfilling and making you happy.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, look, you can find out more about Steph and the great work that she and her company does at Barr None. So it's BARRNONE.com.au. The links to that will be in the show notes, and also Steph's LinkedIn profile as well. And if you'd like to find other great stories like Steph's, you can just go to buildlivegive.com on our podcast section there, and you can do that. And also please share Steph's story and other great stories so that we can help other corporate escapees build a great business, live a great life, and give back. But Steph, I want to thank you for being on the show today, and it's been a pleasure having you, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the year.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Steph. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you're inspired by listening to our wonderful guest stories. All of our guests know the one ingredient to rapidly grow their dream business. That is picking the right suppliers. Let's face it, it's too hard doing it all on your own. So with this in mind, we have created a free on-demand training which gives you the 4 essential questions to ask suppliers. I've combined my 18 years experience at Coca-Cola and 7 years advising corporate escapees all over the world to give you actionable advice in less than 25 minutes. Simply go to buildlivegive.com/webinar. If you are tired of underachieving and want to fill gaps in skills, please watch our on-demand training now. The link will also be in the show notes. Please check it out.
Thank you for listening to the Corporate Escapees podcast, brought to you by the team at Build, Live, Give. If you found this podcast helpful, please share it with other corporate escapees. If you would like to join a community of like-minded peers, please visit www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening and be brave.